I do note that our counter of the clock has gone down. So Stephen, are we ready to get started? And I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I appreciate that. I think we've got a few more folks that we just need to get promoted to panelists here.
Okay.
Let me take care of that. And I know we have a number of presenters that are going to be on today, so we'll be promoting folks as we get to those presentation points.
Great.
Bear with us on that. And just looking back here, I'm pretty sure. Oh, I see we have some of our presenters already. Okay. Trying to just do a quick count. I think we may have a quorum. Yep, I think we do at this point. So I think we're ready to go.
Okay, wonderful. So first, I have threatened my children to keep quiet in the background, but my dogs are not so compliant. So apologies if you hear lots of French bulldog noises in the background. We'll get started. Obviously, I am not Chair Bubenek, but we wish him well on his time out of town. So let's get started. Just a reminder about public comments. If you are interested in providing verbal public comments during the virtual meeting, please write to lutdir@washingtoncounty.or.gov. By the 9 o'clock, you should have done so by this morning. Submitting comments in writing is preferred. Those submitted after email by 9 a.m. on the day of the meeting will be shared with the committee, and then those will be described. So if you wanted to provide public comment but missed it, then submit them by email for next time. You can always put information into the chat function and ask questions, I'm sure. Okay, so let's go ahead.
Sorry, Mayor. Just
Sure.
a quick point. We don't have chat enabled for these.
Oh, I apologize.
No worries.
I already know that. But all right. Well, then they can submit an email going forward. All right. Chair Bubenek is on vacation this week, so I'm going to run today's meeting as the alternate, and then Councillor Gonzalez will attend in his place as well. We have also heard that Councillor Rosenthal will be absent today, and Councillor Juan Carlos will attend in his place. So we welcome, I see Councillor Juan Carlos here, thank you. We'd also like to welcome Wilsonville's Council President, Kristen Ackerval, and I apologize if I did not say that correctly, so please correct us when you come on. We welcome her as the new regular member for Wilsonville, so thank you. And then Stephen, let's go ahead and, do I hand this over to you for roll call then?
Yeah, that'd be great. And just a couple of quick notes. I know Councillor Gonzalez from Tualatin, I believe, is sitting in for Mayor Bubenek today. Councillor Gonzalez, we're going to try to promote you to a panelist here in just a moment. Oh, might have done that. Okay. Yes, great. Thank you. Welcome. And so I'll go ahead and then I just received a note from Mayor Callaway. He may be joining just a few minutes late, so we'll be keeping an eye out for him as well.
Wonderful.
I'll run through a quick roll call. So for going again by jurisdiction order, City of Banks, Mayor Jones.
Here.
Thank you. City of Beaverton, Mayor Beatty.
Me and the vice mayor are here today.
Excellent. Welcome. City of Cornelius, Mayor Delane.
Present.
Oh, there you are. Oh, you don't have your camera on. There you are. Okay, thank you. City of Durham, Mayor Sherrado. Okay, we'll keep an eye out for Mayor Sherrado. Forest Grove, Mayor Wenzel.
Here.
City of Hillsborough, Mayor Callaway should be joining us soon. We'll come back to him. For King City, we obviously have Mayor Fender here. Thank you, serving as our chair today. For North Plains, Mayor Linehan.
Here.
Thank you. City of Sherwood, Mayor Rosner.
I am here.
All right. City of Tigard, Mayor Lou.
Here.
Thank you. City of Tualatin, we should have Councillor Gonzalez.
Here.
Thank you. Welcome. City of Wilsonville, Council President Ackerval.
Here, it's Ackerval.
Ah, thank you.
It's fine.
Right.
Thank you. Not an easy one from the get-go. It's fine.
Thank you. And for the county, Commissioner Flack. Thank you. And that takes care of our members. We have some non-voting members with us. We have Councilor Gonzalez from Metro standing in today for Councilor Rosenthal. Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
And ODOT, I believe Stephanie Turner, are you with us? Yeah, I see Stephanie's name. And
Oh, sorry. No, I can't turn my video on. Oh, there we go. Hi, I'm here. Thank you.
great. Yeah, thanks for joining us. And I don't think we have our TriMet rep yet. If we do, we'll keep an eye on the list here and make sure to promote them as soon as we have them. So I think we're complete. Thank you.
All right, so first up is going to be consideration of our meeting summary from July 17th, 2023. Has everyone had a chance to review?
I'll make a motion to approve the summary.
Second.
All right, we have a, that's been moved
I'll
in.
second it.
Wonderful, it's been seconded. And then Stephen, apologies, do you need a roll call or just a hand, hands, or how would you like to note the vote?
We can do it either way. Show of hands is fine, or just a quick voice vote, or a little both, whichever.
All right, let's do hands so that Stephen can look. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand, please.
All right, thank you.
All right. We're going to take that as motion carries. All right, moving along now to the 2024 Metro Urban Growth Report, Industrial Alliance Supply. Mayor Tim Rosner is going to present and kick off the presentation and introduce his team. After the presentation, we're going to ask for questions and comments, but note that Metro is currently working through the urban growth management process and expects to take recommendations to Metro Council at the end of 2024. Metro staff will also be attending the meeting and listening in here and can be available to answer questions if needed. So Tim, we'll kick it off to you for an introduction, please.
All right, thank you, Mayor Fender. Yeah, so some of you have seen parts of this presentation or smaller condensed forms. This is actually our fourth stop on this particular roadshow. We've talked to the GPI. We had a very brief conversation with Washington County mayors about it in a previous meeting, and we just did a presentation for WEA as well. But the general gist of this is, most of you know that the urban growth report process has started with Metro, and we want to partner with Metro and shine a little light on the need for industrial lands, and how do we make sure that as a region we are well positioned to compete for those traded sector jobs that we all want to come to this region. So we've been doing a lot of work with GPI out in Sherwood on this particular issue, and we thought it would be great to have a conversation with the WCCC about this as well. So that's about the extent of my part of this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to the team because they're the experts, but we have Eric Rutledge here from the city of Sherwood. He's all things planning for Sherwood. We also have Keith Campbell, our city manager. Bruce Coleman is with us today as well. And most of you know Bruce, he's our economic development manager. And it's not on the agenda, but we also have Jill. And Jill, your last name's Miles, right? Did I get this right?
Yes.
Yeah. So who's going to talk a little bit about industrial land needs from a site selector point of view. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and kick it off to Keith. Did you want to say anything before Eric starts?
No, I think Mary, you did a nice job of covering it, and we'll get right into the presentation.
Great. Take it away, Eric.
Actually, I think Keith, are you on this first slide?
Yeah, so I guess just the purpose of what we're here to talk about today is the Metro Urban Growth Report, as the mayor had talked about, looking at industrial land supply and needs for ways for WCC to collaborate to provide a meaningful input in this process. We want to focus on industrial land needs to support trade sector jobs and workforce development. We're going to talk in this presentation on why this report is important for our growth and our development, and just kind of Sherwood's economic development focus that we really are focused on as a city in our presentation, and then just trying to see if we can get consensus building for next steps with this organization. So with that, I'll be turning it over to Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. And also Eric Rutledge, Community Development Director with the city. So just really briefly, the Urban Growth Report timeline, and really this is, I'd say, also the urban growth boundary expansion timeline as well, not just the Urban Growth Report. But that process is underway. It's been kicked off this summer, 2023. Metro's convened a few different advisory bodies and engagement meetings. We can share more about that detail. Some of you are on those committees, but basically the process is underway. The next formal step for cities is to actually submit a letter of interest to Metro, and that letter of interest is due in December of this year, 2023. In order to make a formal ask to Metro, a city must have a concept plan completed, not for the LOI specifically, but when we get further down the road next year, we have to have the city has to have a concept plan completed to make the ask. That's new this year, or this cycle. Sherwood has an accepted concept plan, Sherwood West, and we might share a little bit more about that. The Sherwood City Council has accepted the plan, but we haven't yet decided on whether or not we will actually make an ask to Metro. And so we have 2 different work sessions planned this fall to discuss that with the council, and that's where the decision making will occur on whether or not we make an ask, and if we do, how much of Sherwood West we will actually ask for. But the first sort of indication of our intentions will be in this December LOI. June 2024, we'll do, Metro will release the draft report. In fall of 2024, public hearings by the Metro Council, and then in winter of 2024, actual decision making by the Metro Council. So that's high level timeline. Just really briefly, and some of you may know this, but what's actually in the report, at the highest level, there's going to be growth forecast for population and employment that gets reconciled with the buildable lands inventories for both housing and employment, and that determines whether or not we have enough existing supply within the urban growth boundary. There's more to it than that. Things that are germane to this discussion. In the 2018 report, during the last cycle, there was a regional industrial site readiness inventory that was an appendix to the urban growth report. I'm not sure if that's going to be included this cycle, but we hope so. We hope that inventory is updated so we get a picture of industrial land supply within the region. The second one is really what you're going to hear from us, and what we hope is included this cycle as well, which is an assessment of the potential economic benefits of any proposed UGB expansion for employment uses. So not just looking at supply and demand, but also, you know, what are the regions or that specific city's aspirations, and what are the economic benefits of that UGB expansion, again, for employment land specifically. And then also for this discussion, they'll be looking at potential office to residential conversions as well. And then just wanted to highlight a few different, or a few quotes from the 2018 report. And this is really our takeaway today during this presentation. And it talks about, you know, basically the process for employment land, not for residential, that's kind of separate in this discussion, but for employment and determining the supply and demand. And I'm just going to read them because I think they're really good quotes. The first one is, it is challenging to estimate land needs based on an employment forecast. This difficulty is amplified by the additional uncertainty surrounding employment forecasts, since job growth can be influenced, for better or for worse, by international relations, monetary policy, and many other factors that lie outside the control of cities, counties, regions, or the state. And I think we saw a really good example of that with the CHIPS Act being passed at the federal level, and then the state passing sort of a complementary, you know, bill. And you know, that happened. I don't think the city of Sherwood, you know, saw that coming a few years ago. I don't know that the county saw that coming a few years ago, or even the state, but it happened. And we want to be able to take advantage of those opportunities that are outside of our control. And then the second quote is, For these reasons, determining industrial land needs is best understood as an exercise in economic development goal setting rather than forecasting. This is true at the regional level and even more so at the local level. And that's kind of our takeaway. And our sort of discussion questions for you is, what are our economic development goals around around employment and traded sector, and what type of industrial land needs, does that call for? And I'll turn it over to Bruce, who's going to talk a little bit more about this report and our region.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Good afternoon. Really, my topic is going to be to talk about the urban growth report and the urban growth boundary expansion process and why that's important for the economic viability and prosperity of Washington County. I think everybody knows that Washington County is one of the key economic development drivers of both the state and the region. And we all know about the importance of manufacturing to the west side and in the county's economy. And for example, even though there are few cities, particularly in the northern part of the county, that are thought of primarily as the Silicon Forest, really all of the cities in Washington County have technology manufacturing industries. And we have one of the strongest semiconductor supply chain clusters in the United States. We also have a very strong technical workforce. However, a lot of that workforce is starting to retire. And so we really need to be getting ready for the next generation of workforce. And I think that will build and retain the middle class for this county. And I think that's all consistent with the 2018 Urban Growth Report, which talks about manufacturing as the backbone, to the metro economy, because traded sector jobs really create higher paying family wage jobs, and about 42% of the 42% more than average jobs are paying, which is of course really important in income tax producing state. So really traded sector employment is what creates the opportunity for diversity and equity and economic mobility, because the barrier for entry really doesn't necessarily require a high school diploma or even a college degree. We're asking for a market-driven approach to the Urban Growth Report and to the urban growth boundary expansion. And we think it has to be an aspirational approach to economic development in this entire process in order to grow industrial land and then traded sector jobs. And that, I think, really requires an ongoing and early engagement process that should include not only the cities and the county, but industrial real estate experts and the private sector and site selectors and other stakeholder groups, for example, such as NAIOP and Oregon Business and Industry and the Semiconductor Association of Oregon and a lot of other important players in this process. We're going to talk now about corporate site selectors and their perception of Greater Portland as a place to locate business. And here I'm going to turn over the presentation to Jill Miles. I think many of you know her. She has over 20 years of experience as Senior Business Recruitment Manager for the state. She's now retired. She worked extensively with site selectors, and she's now with Grella Strategic Partners, a site selector in Atlanta. So Jill, it's all yours.
Great, thanks. Just to make sure that everybody can hear me. All right. Okay, thank you so much. So I'm only going to touch on some key things that I've learned as the Business Oregon's recruitment leader. But let's just kind of take just a quick step back. And I really appreciate, first of all, that Sherwood is taking such an aggressive stance in trying to set their own destiny and when it comes to industrial land. I didn't get a chance to say that the other day, but I want to applaud you guys for being proactive and looking at opportunities, because as somebody who's been with the state of Oregon for over 27 years, building out urban growth boundaries and setting supply for industrial lands is very important. And I think COVID kind of, kicked us a little bit. So everybody's kind of, in my opinion, playing catch up, and Sherwood is taking a very aggressive and proactive stance. And so for that, Bruce, you and your team, I want to applaud you guys for that. But let's talk about some of the pros that we've got going here in Oregon as somebody who has represented the state as long as I have. workforce for Oregon is undisputed. Everybody knows we have an amazing workforce. It starts with just the quality of what we have in our metals manufacturing, our traded sector manufacturing, such as timber, food and beverage, but also with our semiconductor and R&D, as well as bioscience, which has become one of the key industries that Business Oregon has taken on. So when I represented Oregon, I never had to sit there and tout how great our workforce is. It was pretty much prevalent, okay? Same thing in terms of pros is Oregon's transportation advantages are pretty strong, even though we're a small state. If you think about it in terms of population, we're a large state in terms of geography, but what we do is we do know how to move commerce, and we know how to move it well, whether it's with our short lines, with our mainline railroads, with our 23 ports, our interstate system. And most people don't realize we have 3 interstates, 82, 84, and I-5, and then 405 and 205, as well as 105 down in Eugene are part of the I-5 corridor. So we have that. And Highway 97 is also a main transportation corridor for Oregon. So we move product well, and we have all those mechanisms in place. The other thing, even though I think it's kind of getting a little bit challenging, is we still have affordable housing. When you look at Seattle, British Columbia, the San Francisco Bay Area, all the way down into LA and San Diego. So if you look at the West Coast, we're still affordable, whether it's the Portland region or not. So those are what are some of the things that I would do when I was representing Oregon as a recruitment officer. I would talk about these things, and I would highlight PSU and Portland Community College and Mount Hood Community College and Oregon Tech. I would represent all of that, talking about the advantages. Now, here's going to be the hard part for you guys. I use cons instead of negatives because I think that's a better word, but Bruce knows, as well as other economic developers, whether they're with GPI or the city of Hillsborough, we are what I consider kind of in a land crisis. You guys are taking it and you're running with it, which you're going to set a precedent so that everybody else can kind of learn through what the city of Sherwood is going through. I can tell you right now, before I left, and I left Business Oregon on June 1st and went into the private sector, I can tell you that over the last 24 months, Oregon has not been able to submit on multiple projects, communities, not the state, the communities. And Bruce knows this. And he's one of the few that actually says, Jill, I don't have anything for you on this project. We're not submitting on interested projects, whether they're semiconductor related, whether they're metals related, or food and beverage. There's a lot of things going on with hydrogen and other industries that aren't getting the, if a community doesn't submit, we're not going to be able to compete, okay, for that kind of work. So it's land. As far as building inventory, I know we have open inventory in commercial space, but is it transferable to traded sector? So when you have building inventory, you may say, yeah, we've got so many hundred thousands of square feet, but at the end of the day, is it transferable to those industries that you want to have in your community? And if you're focusing on traded sector versus back office or high tech or anything like that, you really need to pay attention to your building inventory. The con in terms of transportation, which I talked about the other day, is when the Portland region is, and I'm going to be real honest with you guys, because I know the guys in Chicago and Seattle and everything, when they're saying that the commute challenges in the Portland region are as bad as Seattle, we have an issue there, because it's not about just moving commerce. We're moving commerce, but you know what? We need to move the workforce too. And I think that's where communities need to probably step up and do a little bit more work around how are we going to put transit in place so that people can get to their jobs, because companies are looking at how am I going to fill my workforce needs. Okay. And then funding for infrastructure. I'll be honest with you guys. I think there's funding. Obviously, there's a lot of federal dollars that are flowing into the states. It's important for jurisdictions to know what's coming in and how to access it, whether it's broadband, whether it's water, wastewater. So this would be a good opportunity to sit down with the leadership of Business Oregon and find out how those dollars are flowing and what they look like. Every state's managing their federal flow of funding. You know, it started at the beginning of COVID. It's still going on right now with chips, with broadband. But one of the things that came out of some testimony for the Semiconductor Work Task Force, and I sat in and I listened to them. You know, I get bored at night, so I listen to testimony in the legislature. But one of the things that they said was, we have plenty of industrial land. What we don't have is the funding to serve it. Somehow we have to connect those dots, okay? If I'm a site selector and I'm bringing you a project and it's going to take 18 months, and let me tell you something, I'm really happy for Sherwood for where they're going. But you guys, you know, it's going to be another year before we really know how you guys are going to pull the trigger on more opportunities, because you have to go through this process. So I applaud you for it, but at the same time, get as prepared as possible for it. And then lastly, I'm going to, you know, homelessness, it is what it is. Every jurisdiction has to manage it. The problem is, and I'm going to say this, I used to be the RDO, the Regional Development Officer for Business Oregon out in Eastern Oregon. So I covered 5 counties out in Eastern Oregon. We always knew that if Portland isn't healthy, the rest of the state isn't healthy. So let's all get that healthiness there, because it's a perception issue. It may not be a reality for the city of Sherwood. It may not be a reality for Hillsborough or North Plains or others, but the perception is there. And I've had to listen to that perception for years, ever since COVID hit. So we just need to support each other. I don't have the answer, or I don't even know how to address it, to be quite honest. So I'm watching, you know, with a lot of patience as leadership in some of our jurisdictions are dealing with that. But it is what it is. When a site selector says, Jill, pick me up at the airport, but let's not go down 205 or I-5, I'm sitting here trying to go, okay, how do I get to Woodburn without going on 205? You know, trying to pick circuitous routes are a little bit challenging, because the site selector didn't want the company representatives to see some of the things that are there. Everybody's dealing with it. I don't care what jurisdiction it is, in which state, but just so you know, those are kind of some of the things. The other thing, based on a conversation we had a couple days ago, and I will be quiet, is 50 to 100 acre sites. There's only 3 in the Portland region. That's not acceptable. And you're going to miss opportunities. So if I'm going to say any harsh words, I'm going to tell you 50 to 100 acre sites, not having a dozen or more available is, in my opinion, as somebody who now represents the other side of the table, is just not acceptable. So I'll stop and stay on as you guys ask questions, and you can move forward on your.
No, thanks so much. I appreciate that. I just want to make one statement from the Semiconductor Task Force report. It says that in the aggregate, the metro region shows thousands of acres designated for industrial property over the next 20 years. However, a closer look at this land shows very few sites that are appropriate size and are development ready and suitable for manufacturing. And this applies not just to semiconductor. The really question is, how are we going to be successful in economic development compared to our aspirational peers, Salt Lake and Denver and Phoenix and Nashville and Charlotte? These are very proactive regions, and this is not just a semiconductor industry. It applies, as Oregon Manufacturing Council tells us, it applies to all types of manufacturing. We need various tools. In addition to land supply, we need tools such as industrial infrastructure financing, land aggregation tools, talent and workforce development, competitive incentives, and tax environment and regulatory certainty. So Washington County is really the key to the future of this region in many cases, and there's a need for collaboration for Washington County to be economically successful. And I'm going to turn this over now to the mayor and Keith to talk about our economic development focus in Sherwood.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. I'll kick us off. I mean, what are we have as a city council that's really has aspirational economic development goals? To use the old proverb, we're planting trees today for future generations to be able to enjoy, and trying to really have a forward-thinking and proactive approach to how we're doing economic development. Also, we understand that our long-term health and for our community is to find a better diversity with our housing and our jobs balance, so that we can have a good diverse tax base going forward in the future. And what we're seeing with boots on the ground is that there is currently a strong demand for industrial and advanced manufacturing spaces. We're seeing a really low vacancy rate, currently at 2.6%, which is effectively meaning that there is no space. And we're seeing that in our area, industrial sites are being leased before they're even completed. We're seeing that the demand is high, and really the developers are picking and choosing, who is the best tenants for what they want, which really shows us it's not anecdotal. This is real world type situations that we're dealing with. We also know that we're running out of viable industrial land over the next 5 or 6 years. And so if we're really thinking long-term and aspirational, we really need to think how we're going to be competitive, how we're going to remain with those other cities, other areas, other regions that are really aggressive in what they're doing. And we see potentially, as we look at Sherwood West as a tech innovation park as potentially part of that design and plan. But again, it'll be a while before we know where we're going to go and where we're going to land on that. And with that, I'd like to turn over the mayor to talk about what next steps would be and what he would like to see kind of our next steps for this group.
Looks like the mayor might be frozen there. Don't know if what was that me.
If the mayor is frozen,
Okay. Can you hear me now?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. I couldn't find my little mute button. No, thanks folks for the presentation. That was amazing as usual. And I appreciate all the work you guys put into it. So yeah, so for next steps, I mean, we're really talking about the urban growth boundary report and how, Sherwood's been thinking a lot about how we can support Metro in their efforts to put out a quality report. And one of the things I've been talking a lot about lately is the report needs to be more than just here's a forecast. We talked about this earlier, and I think the pre-2018 report talked about this. It really needs to be more aspirational and talk about, okay, what are our goals in the region, and how do we achieve those goals, and specifically what are steps that we can take to make that happen so we can be more competitive. So we did want to get in front of this group just to have a quick conversation with you all about what you guys think about that and how we can support Metro in these efforts, and what are some actions that we can take as cities to be supportive. One of the things I think about we talk about industrial land readiness. Bruce mentioned the total number of acres. I think Jill mentioned this too, the total number of acres we have available versus what's actually ready to go. And do we have enough of the larger sites that are going to be attractive to some of the traded sector industries that we'd like to have come to this area? What we've found here in Sherwood is that we have to partner with Metro on that, because when it comes to site readiness, that really takes a deep dive on each site, what's there. Is sewer there? Is water there? Is it shovel ready? What do we need to do to make it shovel ready? And make sure that we have an industrial readiness component of the urban growth report that reflects all of that detail so we can be responsive to it. That's one area I think we can be supportive with Metro on that, because it really requires looking at the detail. And I think another area is being, I guess I'll say, vocal about what our goals are in our communities when it comes to economic development. So Metro is fully aware of what those are, and we can incorporate that into the report. So those are kind of the two big areas. Bruce, am I leaving anything out?
No, I think those are the basic areas. We're trying to see if there's some opportunities for consensus and by the cities in the county in terms of where we might be going in terms of the report and the urban growth management process, and just to make sure we're speaking as much as possible with a unified voice.
Great. So with that, I guess we'll just open it up for any questions that you might have for the team or conversation or thoughts.
And if I could just jump in here, I think we've used up most of the allotted time for this item already. So if we can kind of keep our Q&A probably to 5, maybe 10 minutes. Thank you.
Mayor Rosner?
Sure.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I really appreciate the report. Thank you for the information. I know that you and I have chatted about it too in previous days. But I just want to remind too that, although that North Plains is not in the Metro UGB space, North Plains is still certainly a part of Washington County and the economy in Washington County. And so we here see a need for a countywide economic development vision to better understand and coordinate industrial land availability and readiness efforts. So it's a conundrum. It's like, okay, I know that this is a Metro focus topic, right? But what happens in Metro affects cities like North Plains and Banks. We provide suburban communities, and household and workforce space just as much as every other city on this panel in this group does in Washington County, but without a sort of a significant rebalancing of that employment investment. I just really want to make sure that Metro is also having conversations and hears the voices of cities not within the boundaries, because we are significantly impacted by what happens there. So my 2 cents to channel Truax adjusted for inflation. Thanks.
No, I think that's spot on, because it's the county as a whole. And so, yeah, 100%. Mayor Beatty.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, gotcha.
Okay. I don't know what was happening there. To dig down on Mayor Lanahan's points a little bit more, I think we need more than a countywide plan, because I don't think a lot of people would see Beaverton and North Plains as very similar cities, but we are. We're predominantly bedroom community in Beaverton, just like North Plains. And when we start thinking about property taxes, the city of Beaverton just dug out of a $10 million structural deficit. People and houses cost more to serve. Industrial lands bring in more tax revenues for cities. And so there's not like, if we start prioritizing industrial growth in Sherwood and Hillsborough over everyone else, which I'm not fundamentally opposed to, there needs to be breaks for cities like mine and Terry's where people are living, because we simply can't afford to continue to build multifamily homes for everyone to go out of our community to work. And the way that the system is designed is it's pitting us against each other rather than focusing as a region. Because I think we could all agree we would want industrial land farther away from residential cores. And we would want them in cities like Sherwood and far out in Hillsborough. We don't want them in downtown Beaverton. But the reality is our city is trying to desperately bring in industrial and commercial businesses at the sacrifice of housing, which we're really good at doing. We are very good at doing housing, but I'm trying to stop my council from doing more housing because we simply, every time we build multifamily, it's less property tax revenue and it's costing more expensive to live here. And so we have to reconcile with that as a region. And I don't know exactly how we do it, but that to me is the frustrating piece. And that our state legislature doesn't understand. I just walked Maxine Dexter around for 3 hours and she had no idea how property taxes worked.
I just, if I could comment on that real quick, I could not agree with you more. You know, Sherwood, when I got on council 5 years ago, and we kind of had a change in how the council thought, we were in that same boat. We're 85% residential, and that created a lot of structural deficits for us. So that's one of the reasons we've been focused on it. But I agree, it's a regional effort. We need to raise all boats as we think about this. It does, you know, I don't particularly mind if another city gets a great opportunity, because at the end of the day, it helps us out too. Because, you know, if we have a plant go in, another chip manufacturing plant go in, we're going to see the benefits of that out in Sherwood as well. So I agree 100%. It needs to be a regional effort.
So I'm gonna jump in here, Tim. We have Councilor Juan Carlos has his hand up, and then we're gonna have to kind of get back on track onto the agenda. I think we're gonna have to figure a way to kind of continue these conversations and this discussion point, because I think there's a lot to unpack here. So we'll kind of figure out that offline. But for the last comment, Councilor Juan Carlos, take it away, please.
Thanks, Chair Bender. First and foremost, as the obviously Metro Councilor on the call, I wanted to take some time to one, thank the city for the effort in putting the presentation together, and also the fact that we have this space to have this kind of dialogue across jurisdictions to talk about our future, our vision, our values, our priorities. I think those are exactly the things that we need to be doing, especially after the pandemic. Just some really brief comments here. The council, Metro, our staff, you know, we're really eager to work with you, work with the entire region, and partner on this report. I know that my staff has meetings scheduled with cities both within and outside the urban growth boundary that are nearby and working together. The presentation, I think, detailed some what I see as low-hanging fruit and opportunities for us to strike on. You know, I think the council, especially over the last few years, has grown more and more committed, focused to readiness and to supporting our cities. Since 2015, when the concept readiness resources were made available, Metro Council has supported 100% of the UGB requests made from cities. That's something I feel really proud of, and something that we're committed to. As you've seen with River Terrace 2, the council is also very eager to do, you know, to explore all the tools that we have in our tool belt to help us move our goals forward, both in housing and industry. You know, I in addition to that, we're going to be working with a consulting firm. I had the name down here earlier. That's going to be looking at the pro forma model a little bit differently than what we've done in the past, and I think will also help us address some of those issues. Ultimately, what I do want to communicate is that we really do need to collaborate together and partner together. Metro, we rely on the city and the county staff to provide that local knowledge in addition to the parcels and what exists on a map. That coordination is critical. We have a few different committees and bodies that have been organized, but at the end of the day, you know, we will be working through this buildable land inventory. We'll be working with that model. You know, I feel personally committed to helping to, you know, open up the model and help us understand what some of those drivers and variables are in that. But at the end of the day, like Mayor Rosner mentioned, what we really need to do, and this council is focused on, is what do we want to be in the next 10, 20 years? What are our industry clusters? What makes our region competitive? What value do we bring? And that's something that you'll hopefully see in this process. Anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts. And again, a sincere thank you for the presentation. And, you know, we're here to work together.
Thank you for that. And Mayor Rosner, thank you, and the city of Sherwood for your presentation. And we will figure out a way to kind of continue the discussion points here that the presentation prompted. We're going to move on now to regional freight delay and commodities movement study. So I'd like to welcome Senior Transportation Planner Tim Collins, who will provide an overview of the regional freight delay and commodities movement study. So I'll hand it over to you, Tim. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I'm Tim Collins. I'm Metro's regional freight planner, and we've been working on the regional freight delay and commodity movement study for a little more than a year and a half, and we want to be able to wrap that up by the end of the year. I'm going to go ahead and share, excuse me, a presentation, hopefully fairly brief, so we have plenty of time to take questions and comments. Let me go ahead and do the share on this. Okay, so this is just our opening slide. As I said, it's we're looking with this study, e-commerce impacts. We have a new regional freight model, so we have some modeling results I wanted to share that's specific to Washington County. And also talk about our freight policy questions and how we might be refining our regional freight policies. So everyone can see this presentation and it's forwarding. Is that good? Okay, good. We had some study goals that we had for this, or objectives. Out of the regional freight model, we wanted to look at the highest tonnage and the highest dollar value of commodities that are moving around the region. We also looked at increases in e-commerce and delivery, seen a massive amount of that, not surprisingly, heading into the pandemic, and it continues on in the years following coming out of the pandemic. We also wanted to examine congestion and unreliability and some of its impacts. And we're making some recommendations for either future freight policy, or if we're not at a point to actually propose a freight policy, we would look at an ongoing study that would help us get there. So this is national e-commerce data and how that trends. We don't have the regional data available, but we're quite confident that it's very similar here in our region as it has been across the nation, particularly the spike that we've seen in e-commerce sales in 2020, particularly starting in the second quarter. You can see here that before the pandemic, we were growing at about 3.6% per quarter on e-commerce sales. That spiked during the pandemic. And actually, we had an increase of 32% during one of the quarters as things shut down because of the pandemic. We're still seeing increases in e-commerce sales, just not at quite the rate that we've seen pre-pandemic, about 2.5% per quarter. And one of the things that we want to try to get to is, what effects has that pandemic had on the e-commerce sales in the state and other impacts. Here's one of the impacts that we found that was actually at the regional level. You'll see 4 different lines here. The black line here at the bottom is looking at the total private employment, and it's been really flat since 2019 before the pandemic. You see a little bit of a drop there during the pandemic. It's coming back very slow. Same thing with the truck transportation employment sector. It's been very flat throughout. But employment sectors that are more related to e-commerce like the couriers and messengers, that yellow line, or the green line, warehouse and storage employment, those workers. You've seen a really big increase during 2020 and a dip, but coming back up during 2021. So it basically, there's a lot of jobs in those two sectors, truck transportation and couriers and messengers, that aren't related to e-commerce. But there's enough there that you can kind of see the impact that e-commerce has had. One of the other things that we wanted to do is look at e-commerce impact on the region. In general terms, we know that there's been that rise in e-commerce means that there's more demand for industrial real estate development, particularly for some of the larger parcels that was talked about earlier today, primarily to fulfill the demand for these fulfillment centers and larger distribution centers. And you'll see one of those here on the right in the picture, the Amazon. We know that e-commerce deliveries are way up. And as I pointed out in the previous slide, the jobs in those key sectors are also up, which also impacts wages. The uncertainty that we've had is the impact on traffic or environmental impacts. Do we have more trips due to e-commerce? Do we have about the same, or do we have less? And that's still very uncertain. The studies have not shown definitively where we're going with that. And a lot of that's due to the fact that you've got e-commerce orders that are way up, but you also have retail orders that are also up. Some of it due to the fact that people aren't just ordering online and saving a trip. They're going to the store and looking at the products and then coming home and ordering. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about freight movement. As I mentioned, we have a new regional freight model that allows us to look at both tonnage and dollar value of various different commodities moving around our region. It's a model, so you can't look at it as precision, but we did put a lot into our new regional freight model to make it more practical, better balanced. So just as a reminder, out of the regional freight strategy and the regional transportation plan of 2018, here is our regional freight network. And that basically, the heavy lines are our main roadway routes where we have the most trucks. They tend to be the state highways and the interstate system. But also importantly, we have what we call regional intermodal connectors. You'll see a number of those that are connecting I-5 to our marine terminals and other intermodal facilities up here in North Portland. The different commodities that we look at, and this follows the categories that the federal government looks at when it comes to commodities that are moved by truck, freight in freight corridors, is that we have 10 different categories. I think the federal government had 11, but we wanted to combine it down a little bit. Agriculture includes live animals, cereal, grains, animal feed, lots of other agricultural products. The chemicals products, primarily it's fertilizer. It also includes some pharmaceutical products, plastics, and rubber. The coal, oil, and waste, I call it the energy sector. That's including gasoline, fuel oils, and other mineral ores. Electronics, I know you guys are real familiar with that, includes the computer chips coming out of Intel and lots of other electronics that help support that industry. Food includes alcohol, tobacco, bakery goods, and other prepared stuff. The gravel's pretty straightforward, gravel, sand, all kinds of different rock products in that category. Machinery includes fabricated metals and precision instruments, very broad category also. And one of the broadest is miscellaneous manufacturing goods. That includes mixed freight like restaurant food, hardware, also office supplies. Motor vehicles is not just the cars that you see going to the dealerships or being shipped around the nation, both imports and exports, but it also includes other commercial vehicles like the ones that you see out at the airport. And wood and paper is pretty self-explanatory. So now that we've described the different commodities, I wanted to share just one corridor that we're seeing. It is what I call the Sunset Freight Corridor. We've got it goes from 217 out to the North Hillsborough Industrial District. We've got a location here on US 26 near Cedar Hills Boulevard, and another one out past Cornelius Pass Road, along with some others. You can actually kind of do like a screen line across here that includes Evergreen Parkway and Cornell Road to see kind of what types of products and what the volume of products are that are coming in and out of the North Hillsborough area. So that's what we'll take a look at. You'll see here that the commodities, those 10 commodity groups that I talked about, are all color coded here. And out in this area, particularly like on Cedar Hills, on US 26 near Cedar Hills Boulevard, you can see the role that electronics is playing in the value. This is daily value of goods coming out of the model. Some of the key findings in this corridor is, as you've seen with all those different colors on the charts, that US 26 west of 217 carries a big different types of commodity groups. US 26 west of Cedar Hills Boulevard, as I mentioned, electronics is really predominant, but also the energy commodities, looking at it by daily value. We could be looking at it by tonnage, and of course the heavier goods would stand out more if we were looking by tonnage. But I know this is a group that's really focused on economics, and I think at least for now, the best way to look at it is the daily dollar value. Electronics is overwhelmingly the top commodity when you look at some of those parallel routes like Cornell Road and Northwest Evergreen Parkway. If you look at it in the eastbound direction, you've got electronics really being, the products being electronics coming out of that region on those roadways. And then coming in is machinery going westbound, particularly on Cornell Road. And that makes some sense. If we're going to produce those types of products, we're going to need to have machinery coming in order to facilitate that process. Some other key findings is looking at what the model is showing for growth in commodities. I'm categorizing all 10 of them. It's called all goods. If you're looking at that location on US 26 near Cedar Hills Boulevard, in the eastbound direction, between 2020 and 2045, we see about a 94% increase. That's almost doubling. In the westbound direction, about a 63% increase. I thought it was interesting to kind of look down. I talked about kind of that screen line, looking at US 26, Evergreen Parkway, and Cornell kind of all as a group together. That's there west of Cornelius Pass Road. You can see that's even larger increases in the eastbound direction. It's 102%. And in the westbound direction, all goods is about 114%. That really is being driven by that category of electronics. If you break it down and look at just the electronics category for growth, eastbound at those locations, it's 143% increase, and westbound 144% increase. So I think that really helps us be able to focus on, where is the growth, and also what commodity may be growing faster. One of the key findings out of the model is that we have across the region, all the major interstate highways are carrying the largest daily tonnage and the largest daily dollar value of goods. And that's not surprising from places coming around the region. They all kind of congregate on these interstate highways. If you look around the region also, you see electronics, food, miscellaneous manufacturing, and motor vehicles are the most common commodity types. We wanted to do a little bit of a dive into answering some regional freight policy questions. You see them here on the left. I'll quickly go through what they are. We wanted to look at the trends in the freight sector, and what kind of impacts they're having on the transportation system. We know that technology's had a big impact there, and shifts in demands for products at various locations. When and how should the public sector play a role in addressing the growth of that impacts of e-commerce and goods delivery? The local cities tend to be the ones that take the lead on this by looking at curb management. We know that it's difficult to find a place to load and unload, like in a downtown place that doesn't have a whole lot of places to do that. And then also, land use policy, as we talked about earlier today, trying to really look at, getting ahead of myself here. Do we need to facilitate more space for the larger industrial sites? There's also the third question there is, are there ways to address goods movement performance, and what is relevant to know about those movements? We've heard a lot from industry about the cost of delay and unreliability. And one of the things that we're looking at is looking at average travel speeds throughout the day to kind of measure that delay, and also a measure that looks at, is the facility reliable or unreliable? The last one is, are there ways in which the freight sector can reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And the answer is really yes. Some of the ways we've seen that is with much cleaner, large trucks as the older ones are getting replaced. We also see a lot of movement in electrifying medium and heavy trucks. We've got a really great site out on Swan Island called Electric Island. And I could talk offline about that a little bit. And also the industry is managing demand and customer incentives, looking at having folks pick things up at the store instead of having so many trips to the home. Some of the future analysis that we're going to do in this study, and I kind of addressed it a little bit earlier, is looking at those average travel speeds in all these facilities in the freight corridors and seeing where our new regional mobility policy. And the policy basically on this third bullet here is saying that if we have these expressways, freeways primarily with very limited access, if they drop below 35 miles an hour for 4 more hours out of the day, we're looking at that being not meeting our mobility standard. Also, we have throughways that have signals on them, and of course, they're going to be slower. So we're looking at initially setting a threshold of 20 miles per hour. We're also looking at, on these intermodal facilities, setting a threshold there that's not part of the regional mobility policy, to be part of this freight study at 25 miles per hour. And so the same 4 hours or more a day before it doesn't meet that standard. Anything that we do for regional freight policy or future planning work will go through the regional transportation plan and come back to TPAC and JPAC in the fall, including any future studies. So that's my presentation. Hopefully I didn't take up too much time, and we've got at least 10 minutes or so for questions and comments.
Tim, thank you for that. We'll go ahead and hand it over to the gallery for questions, comments, discussion.
I couldn't possibly have done that good a job to answer every question.
And it's a little hard for me to kind of look. So if you can stop sharing your screen, that would be helpful.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything specific that I wanted to go back to a slide on, but I'll
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess, Stephen, if you can see better than if you can call on anyone.
I don't see any raised hands at this point, Chair.
Oh, I see Steve Calloway. Take it away.
I'll chime in. You know, one of the things that is not present is biopharmaceuticals, which, you know, are produced, you know, in the Hillsborough employment area. And the reason for that, and this goes back to some of the creativity or I guess alternative ways of moving. And you know, because it used to be Genentech, which creates cancer drugs, which, you know, are created today and in doctors' offices tomorrow. What they finally had to do because of the congestion on 26 is, you know, with Business Oregon, Port of Portland, UPS, Hillsborough, different partners, we now have a freight plane, little cargo plane, prop plane that flies, leaves every day at 5:30 from the airport, lands in PDX at 5:37, and by 6 o'clock, you know, those drugs are flying across country on a UPS jet, and they're in doctors' offices the next morning by 9 o'clock. So, you know, that's one reason you don't see biopharmaceuticals on that list of things being moved. But, you know, that was, you know, the congestion was one of the things that caused growth of biopharmaceuticals in Washington County to stop. So, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, it's a good point. If there's other ways to get the movement of those goods besides traveling by truck, they're not included in our regional freight model at this time. A lot of things travel by rail, and we don't have the value of the commodities on rail at this point.
Thank you for that. We'll take Mayor Beatty's, she'll be our final comment question, and then we will move on. And she'll have to do so quietly because the vice mayor is asleep in her lap.
And whereas got my headphones on, she thinks I'm talking to her. I think one of the things that when we're having this conversation, and I hate to pull a card from the tolling conversation, but it's diversion, the amount of traffic that's coming off. And like we talk about 26 and 217, but to me, that's like our community. We're surrounded on 3 sides by freeways in Beaverton, and our community uses them for 1 or 2 exits and gets off. And now what we're seeing is people are doing the same thing to move around traffic. And so as Hillsborough and Beaverton and Washington County have been trying to address congestion on Highway 26, we have work groups working on it. I just think it's going to require more than just us, because if we could solve it upstream, it still goes to a tunnel that's 1 lane each way. And so sometimes I feel like we're often planning in vacuums and it doesn't make any sense. I mean, Mayor Calloway just gave a great example of how they had to pull people together to solve a problem that was far more than the region because we couldn't solve it here. And so I hope as we're starting to have these conversations more and more, we start talking about, you know, what we're going to do around diversion. And because there are communities that are driving through, you know, it's not just Highway 26 to us in 217.
It's a very good point, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted to have this study do real-time data from the national data set on the interstates and the state highways, and really look at throughout the average throughout the year for a day. You know, are we seeing slowdowns to the point that it's not meeting that standard for the new regional mobility policy? And we know that if it is not meeting that, you're right, we're going to have some diversion.
All right, Mayor Callaway with our very final comment, and then we'll go ahead and move on.
You know, one of the things that is not moved on, you know, our highways on 26, you know, is hazardous materials, because that route is still up and over Cornelius Pass Road. And I am always amazed that we make it through each winter without some sort of catastrophe due to ice and snow, the windy roads and semis, you know, basically, you know, passing motor vehicles. So I think as we think about truck, you know, transit and movement of goods, you know, we need to remember the important movement, safe, careful movement of hazardous materials as well.
Thank you for that. And Tim, thank you for presenting with us today. And I'm sure these discussions will also continue and we'll find time.
Sure.
However, today we must move forward on our agenda onto tolling update and the draft Nexus project list. So we're going to hand it over to Washington County Policy Analyst Jessica Pelz, who's going to continue the discussion about tolling Nexus projects from last meeting. And just as a reminder, we know that this is a huge topic, right? So we will have some time for questions and comments, but probably, again, due to timing, we're not going to be able to get to everything. So take it away, Jessica. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Fender. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Pelz, Policy Analyst with Washington County Land Use and Transportation. I will try to move through this pretty quickly. Next slide, please. So through the presentation, I'm going to give a quick update on the Regional Mobility Pricing Project, which we also call RMPP. So you might hear people talking about RMPP, the ODOT Urban Mobility Strategy Finance Plan, and then we'll continue the discussion on draft Nexus project list, because all this is moving very quickly. Next slide. So up until now, we have been, as a region, more focused on the I-205 pricing project, because that was going to start first. And that was the one to put the toll at the Abernathy Bridge to pay for the Abernathy Bridge construction. And it was intended to replace 8 bridges across the Tualatin River on I-205 and add a 3rd lane through the Stafford area of I-205. The Regional Mobility Pricing Project was also kind of happening in the background, but they were doing a lot of the preliminary analysis. And it was going to start later. And now the analysis is really kicking into gear for the RMPP. And so on our side over here in Washington County, now we really need to start being engaged in this and paying attention, because this, of course, is congestion pricing applied to all lanes of I-5 and I-205 from the Columbia River to the Boone Bridge. And that is using electronic methods. They're looking at that now, and I'll show you a few options they're looking at. It'll be gantries, that sort of thing, to track license plates. So the idea is the toll rates will be on a set schedule based on congestion patterns. They can be monitored and adjusted over time. There will be a low-income toll program available on day 1 of tolling. They have a committee that is working on this, and there's a low-income toll report. There's been a lot of work done. And now with the governor's pause on toll collection, the idea is that the RMPP toll collection will begin in the same time frame as the Abernathy Bridge toll collection, so sometime in 2026. The next steps for this, and so as I said a little bit about the options, the modeling group is looking at a few options for the congestion pricing tolling, and I'll go through those in a moment. But the next steps for that is that the modeling is underway right now and in September. And in September, they're expected to start rolling out the modeling evaluation results to the Regional Toll Advisory Committee and other groups. And then they are going to be asking for recommendations on which tolling option will be moved forward as the build alternative in the environmental assessment. And so that means that's the most likely tolling option that will be built. And then the modeling looks at the impacts of that. And that's called the NEPA analysis. Next slide, please. So the first option, and so again, this is just a high-level overview. The modeling has not been done, so I can't really speak to the technical analysis of these. But the first option is a base toll on all the freeway plus congested area tolls. So the fixed base toll rate is where you would enter the freeway, and then the congested area toll in addition to that during peak travel times. The ODOT team has said this is a lower capital cost to construct, but it will be higher operating cost overall due to the complexity required to have so many areas tracked for the base toll rate and the congestion area rate toll. Next slide, please. The next options they're looking at are very similar. This is toll zones. So there would not be a base rate toll. There would be a toll levied as you enter one of these toll zones. Actually, each one you enter, you would have a toll through to go through all these different toll zones. These options differ just in where the toll gantries would be placed. So where people could get on and off. So it'll be a little bit different. And again, I don't really know the ins and outs of how that would impact diversion. And that's some of the modeling that's happening underway right now. They'll see the impacts of how all these perform, how they impact congestion on the freeways themselves, and how they impact diversion on adjacent streets. So the team has said these options would be a higher capital cost to construct, but a lower operating cost once they're in place. Next slide, please. This topic is about the Urban Mobility Strategy Finance Plan. This is important because the governor's pause on toll collection has led ODOT to say that that delay is causing a major financial impact in what they expect to be able to pay for. So this report was approved by the Oregon Transportation Commission on June 28th. And the report says that the delay reduces the expected funding. So they're going to postpone I-205 toll project phase 2, which would add the third lane and complete the seismic upgrades to the Tualatin River bridges. So essentially, the only part of the I-205 toll project moving forward at this moment is the Abernathy Bridge reconstruction. And so the idea moving forward is that they're adjusting the NEPA analysis on the I-205 toll project to look only at the Abernathy Bridge tolling at that particular point versus the 2 areas of tolling that they had expected to do to pay for the Tualatin River Bridge updates as well. So with this reduced funding available, ODOT expects to be able to fund completing the earthquake-ready Abernathy Bridge and implementing tolling in that location, completing advanced design work for the Rose Quarter project, but not going any farther than that, and completing basic planning work for the I-5 Boone Bridge Improvement Project, completing the NEPA environmental review and advanced design for regional mobility pricing project, and establishing the back office systems to operate the tolling system. Next slide. Oh, thanks. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the Nexus projects discussion. If you'll recall at our last meeting, I said that ODOT had asked the Regional Toll Advisory Committee to discuss a process to develop and refine a Nexus project list at their June 26th meeting. We were a little bit unprepared for this ask because everybody had been so focused on I-205 up until now. So we are getting into gear. We're looking at all these project ideas. They have said that Nexus project should complement I-5 and I-205 tolling, so the congestion pricing. Nexus projects will be in addition to projects like they're required for NEPA. So when you have to do NEPA analysis for a project, it identifies areas of impact that you have to pay for as part of the project. So you have to mitigate it, that impact. So these projects are in addition to any of those that we expect to be identified through NEPA. We still have questions about future funding of these projects and also prioritization of the Nexus projects. So at this point, we're moving forward with the idea of just putting anything we expect to meet the definition and put it all on a big list. Our projects, of course, will be in addition to Clackamas County, Multnomah County, Portland, the port. So everybody and the cities also. So it's everybody's projects are going to be in this big list. We still have questions about what the next steps are, but ODOT is going to be working on an implementation plan that the governor's office has asked for that is due in December. And so we will stay engaged in this process so that we can make sure that the implementation plan includes some next steps for what are we doing with this Nexus project list, how it will be prioritized, what are some future funding options. And just a reminder that Mayor Bubenik and Commissioner Fye are members of RTAC, the Regional Toll Advisory Committee. Mayor Bubenik is not here today, of course, but Commissioner Fye is. And so if you have questions about that process, I'm sure she's happy to answer them. Next slide, please. As I said at the beginning, the timeline for this is very fast. This is a slide that we have gotten from ODOT. So this process was initiated at the June 26th RTAC meeting. The July RTAC meeting was canceled, but at the staff level, we have been in pretty constant communication with ODOT about this process. So the Nexus Projects call for projects opened on July 31st, and it closes actually on September 5th, because September 4th was Labor Day, so they have extended to September 5th. They have also proposed that RTAC only meets every other month now going forward. So the October RTAC meeting shown on this slide will now be in November, and the next RTAC meeting will be in September. Next slide. So now I'll go through the definition of Nexus projects and the selection criteria. Nexus projects are pedestrian, bicycle, roadway, or other mobility projects that would complement a tolling system on I-5 and I-205 in the Portland metro area by supporting congestion relief on a corridor that may become more congested with the implementation of tolling. This was actually a big win for us because the Oregon Highway Plan definition of corridor is 1 mile from the facility, from the toll facility. So there's a lot of discussion about this at the staff level. And so this has been broadened to be any corridor that may become more congested with implementation of tolling, or improves access to public transportation, or improves mobility options on a tolled highway traffic diversion corridor. And so that is, again, is that 1 mile. And it provides access to opportunity or addresses transportation related disparities and barriers experienced by toll projects, equity framework communities. And I have a map of that coming up. Next slide. So just a quick run through of the selection criteria. There's the congestion pricing nexus bucket. And within that, project location that has a safety focus or improved safety, provides additional network connectivity, supports congestion relief, provides access to transit, or complements a public transportation strategy project. That is a whole nother list that ODOT had been working with a different group of staff and transit providers to identify public transportation strategy projects that would be needed to support tolling. Next slide. There is an equity bucket that includes a project location that it serves equity framework communities. Equitable engagement has been done or can be done. It reduces travel times or add modal options. It provides access to job centers, and it provides opportunities for reduced greenhouse gas emissions or multimodal transportation. Next slide. And last bucket is project readiness. And so that's where they want to know, is the plan included in a regional transportation plan or a local plan? When will the project be ready for implementation? And does it have local support? Next slide. So to kick off the discussion, we pulled together a draft tolling Nexus project list composed largely of projects that were already proposed for the regional transportation plan. This was reviewed by the WCCC TAC on August 3rd. And the discussion there showed some concern about potential mitigation projects. And I think we just heard this from Mayor Beatty and can expand on it, that these are communities that are adjacent to the freeways, and the solution is not always just widening local roads. So there was a lot of concern about, we don't want to have to widen a 3-lane arterial to a 5-lane arterial, for example. So the projects we propose might be more like a complete streets project to add bike lanes and sidewalks. It could be signal improvements, things like that. There is an opportunity to add projects in the future after modeling data is available. We have asked ODOT to make sure that this is an iterative process. So questions for consideration today: are there projects that should be added? Are there projects that should be removed? Do you have any other feedback or suggestions that we can take back, especially at the staff level, as we work with your city staff to refine these project lists? Here's a map showing the equity framework communities. They are shown in pink. This is based on Metro's equity framework communities work. So again, harkening back to the definition, it has to support equity framework communities or access to jobs, things like that. So I think it's a pretty broad definition that we can make. I mean, people travel to jobs all throughout the area. And so having available routes to do so is important. Next slide. And then just a quick run through. This is a map showing all the proposed Nexus projects that we pulled out of RTP proposed projects. Next slide. And then a closer look at the ones in the south part of the county. So many of these are parallel routes, such as a Boone's Ferry, 72nd Avenue, Highway 99, and also includes some trail projects and transit. So it's got quite a lot of projects in here. And then next slide. This shows ones in the north part of the county that we think might be impacted with congestion diversion. Next slide. So next steps in this process, again, the call for projects ends on September 5th. The next RTAC meeting on September 18th, they are expected to discuss the submitted project list. And then in November, they're expected to refine the Nexus and the public transportation strategy project lists. However, at the staff level, we're asking ODOT to just include the large project list. We don't really see a way to refine that in the absence of modeling data. So that will be certainly under discussion over the next few months. And I think that's all I have for you.
Thank you. Let's go ahead. I see Mayor Rosner's hand up. And just as a reminder, because this is such a big topic, obviously anyone can contact Jessica with follow-up questions after the meeting, and county staff will continue to coordinate about the Nexus project list. With that, I'll hand it over to Mayor Rosner.
Awesome, thank you. Great presentation, appreciate all the hard work. I did have a question. I went on the map of potential congestion diversion areas that may be impacted that you showed for South Washington County. I noticed you didn't have 99 heading down towards Newburgh is highlighted. And I guess my question is, how are you doing that modeling? Because our anecdotal belief is that if you put tolling on I-5, that people are going to cut over to Newburgh and come up at 99 and avoid those tolls altogether, especially if they're going to the work centers over in Hillsborough. So I guess, you know, how did you get to that conclusion? How do we get potential major corridors added to that? That
is such a great question. And I think just the simple answer is that we just included the portion in Washington County. I think I have to look at the map again. Diami helped me pull that together. We can certainly include it to the Washington County boundary. What is interesting, and I hadn't really thought of this before, Yamhill County and Marion County are not involved in this discussion as far as I know at the RTAC table or just the Nexus projects. But I agree with you. What the I-205 toll project NEPA analysis showed was a huge increase of traffic through Canby on Highway 99E as people were cutting across at Aurora and going up to Oregon City. So that is certainly a question I can take back, Mayor Rosner, to the ODOT team. We're meeting now with them.
I would really appreciate that. And, you know, if Yamhill County doesn't want to get involved, it doesn't change the impact it has, you know, on areas of South County, South Washington County, you know, not just Sherwood, but through King City, Tiger, you know, et cetera. So, yeah, I'd love to hear, how do we get that added to the map? And it might be worthwhile for some of us on the edge of the county here to advocate with Yamhill County to get involved, because I think it's going to impact them as well.
Yeah, I will definitely pass that on to ODOT and ask the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd echo, I'm sure Heidi also echoes. I would assume Mayor Bubnak and Tualatin also is going to echo those same concerns. So Tim, thanks for raising that. Steve, your hand's up.
Thank you, Chair. Great materials. Jessica, great presentation. And as I'm looking at RMPP options 2A, where it has the different zones, and I'm just looking at a printout in a notebook here, and it says like zone 1 has 3 gantries. Is that 3 separate tolling locations within that zone, so that there could be conceivably 10 to 12 tolling sites along the road? Or is that 3 gantries to cover 3 lanes of one for each lane of traffic? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And what I think is that it's a gantry at each place that someone would enter the freeway within that zone.
Okay. So
like if there was 3 on-ramps, say, to the freeway, that's where they'd get the charge.
Okay, so you wouldn't necessarily be charged each of those zones, because once you're on the freeway, then you're just on it, and you're not going to be charged again as you go through each zone unless you leave and get back on at another on-ramp.
I think you'll be charged once per zone, but not 3 times if there's 3 gantries per zone, if that makes sense.
Yes. So then if I'm driving up I-5, looking again at 2A, I would theoretically get tolled the first time in zone, looks like 4. And then as I drive through zone 3, 2, and 1 north towards Vancouver, I would be charged 4 different times.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. And then out of curiosity, and I was thinking about it as I was sent on a detour off of 84 down on the 205 recently, due to an accident or construction or something. If we are by ODOT redirected to a toll freeway or a toll section, is there any sort of, relief for that? Because otherwise, that's a great way for ODOT. I'm not saying that, and they wouldn't do it, but I mean, it would be a great way to pick up a bunch of money by closing a freeway and forcing everybody down onto one or the other. So I was just kind of curious to know if there was any sort of mitigation take place when there is when there's a closure of a freeway, so you are forced into a toll area.
That's a really great question. I definitely do not have an answer for, but can certainly ask ODOT and Commissioner Fye. I'm sure you can bring that up at RTAC. That's a really interesting question.
You're very kind. That might be a really dumb question, but
I've never thought of that. So
interesting,
really
is a nice way to present.
Yeah, Jessica, that's a really, Mayor Callaway, that is a really good question, because I don't think that also didn't come up at I'm also on the statewide rulemaking advisory committee with to talk about the rate setting and the schedule that Jessica referenced in one of her slides. But that question didn't come up in terms of rerouting. So definitely we can elevate that and see what relief opportunities that will be provided to residents in the event they're
Commissioner Fye, I'll jump in. We're getting a lot of feedback on your line, and I personally am having a really hard time hearing you. It looks like a few others are. I just wanted to point that out. I don't want to cut you off, but
no worries. I think I'm muffled because I hear. Okay.
All right, perfect. Well, it sounds like Mayor Callaway opened up a good can of worms for further discussion and some gathering of information. Does anyone else have any comments or questions that they would like to raise? Councilor Juan Carlos.
Thanks, Chair Fender. Yeah, I think another thing that I've been really thinking about is the way that we can and should be setting up a general revenue share structure to support cities and counties, especially with the kind of the trends of the gas tax and all that. And I think in general, if not the 25 session, we're going to need to be able to have some really important conversations with our legislators, elevate local voices to figure out how the entire system is supported. And that's one of the areas that I really have felt, we're in a tight project-based schedules. We have Nexus lists, and we need to, we're working through the conditions that we're in, but really looking at that long-term horizon. Just wanted to highlight that and bring that up for the group.
Thank you. Let's see. I see Mayor Rosner is next, and then we will go to Council President Ockerville. Oh, almost. Okay. Thank you.
I'll keep this short. I was just curious, Jessica, are you hearing anything? Is the state looking at Plan B, considering IP4 most likely will get on the ballot in 2024, which could basically make all this work useless if we have to have voter approved tolls. And I'm just curious if there's any conversations going on along those levels.
I would say not at the staff level, no, that everyone is moving forward as if things are just moving forward, and in that, with the exception of the governor's pause on toll collection. So yeah, I think that is a larger discussion, and they're not really engaging with that, at least with RTAC senior staff supporting RTAC.
Is it okay if I go ahead?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, please go ahead.
Yep. So my question, and I'm getting up to speed on what all, it seems like we're putting together this large list, perhaps, right, of all the projects. Yet at the same time, we're doing the framework for the criteria. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around all of that. And I believe in the notes in the packet, it said like that it hasn't been determined, or maybe there won't be, but different weights for the three criteria categories. I wondered if you had any clarification on that, or if there will be like a benchmark minimum for each category, or if we have any more information on some of that. I know we're all, you mentioned it's a quick timeline and we're all just scrambling to try to get this together. I think that perhaps many of us, when we were putting together our TSPs, we didn't have the tolling lens in place when we, put those projects in place. And here, we're taking a lot of the projects from the RTP and putting it in. And just how do we bring organization to all of the moving pieces that we have?
Yes, I share your pain. No, we have no answers on any of that. Yes, we've been asking for what are going to be the evaluation metrics for these? How are we supposed to prioritize that? Well, actually, it'll be RTAC prioritizing the projects. It's also not clear that there's any funding available to pay for any of the projects because they haven't done the modeling to even understand what the toll rate would be and how much revenue that would translate to. Will there be tolling revenue available to help fund the Nexus projects? I don't know. So these are definitely the questions that we're asking at the staff level meetings that we're having with ODOT. And we have recently asked ODOT to make that a more regular recurring meeting. So we are, I think, meeting almost weekly through the next few months, because we have all these huge questions like, what are we doing with this? What's next? What's the purpose? And so, yeah, more to come. And I will certainly come back and update this group as we get more information.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Loop.
Thank you. I just want to add in general that the project list, it looks like, doesn't include some of our projects that were approved after the 2018 RTP. So in our 2040 transportation plan that was approved last year. So there are potential projects for my community that fit this framework that aren't in the list. And so I would encourage you, other cities, to make sure you're not in the same situation. And then we'll be reaching out to Washington County staff to make sure that those potential projects are on the list. Just because there's not funding now doesn't mean that may not change in the future. And so just want to make sure that the list is as inclusive as possible.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I also want to say that the county is not necessarily the clearinghouse for the projects. So we put together this list for discussion. It's based on the 2024 RTP projects that were submitted. And what we're expecting is that any jurisdiction that is the nominating agency for a project identified in the RTP will be the one who submits it to ODOT. And we have sent out the form that they have sent us for the intake form for the call for projects. And so we're going to continue talking with everybody. So it will be a group effort to make sure that all bases are covered.
Thanks for that, Heidi. Stephen.
Yeah, just a really quick closer on that. Mayor Lube's question was spot on, and I wanted to just add to what Jessica was just saying, that we are definitely working at the staff level with all of the cities to help ensure we have a good coordinated understanding of who may be interested in submitting which projects, and that we're sort of tracking it at that level and trying to help ensure we don't have any duplication of submittals and that sort of thing. So I appreciate that.
Great, wonderful, thank you. Well, this discussion will surely be continued. Jessica, thank you for your presentation and joining us. We will go ahead and move on now to the draft regional mobility policy for 2023 RTP. And we welcome Metro Principal Transportation Planner Kim Ellis and ODOT Principal Planner Glenn Bolin. They will provide an overview of the draft regional mobility policy measures being included in the draft 2023 regional transportation plan. I'll hand it over to you both. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Fender. So happy to be here. And I did rearrange the presentation a little bit of what was in your packet, recognizing that you all are close to time. So I will be very brief and just focus more on the process. And then I'm happy to offer for follow-up questions, either to email me directly or we can come back at a future meeting as well. But this topic will also be discussed at upcoming JPAC and MPAC meetings coming forward as well. So I will, so Glenn Bolin, as Mayor Fender said, is also here with me to jointly present and answer questions. And the first piece, can you see that okay? Yeah. So this work, this update to the regional mobility policy, not to be confused with the regional mobility pricing project. I'll just say that this is a policy that's in the regional transportation plan. We had an interim policy in our region for the last 23 years. And this update, we really are updating it to better align with state, regional, and community goals, and to think about more than just moving vehicles during peak travel times, but how think about all the ways that people are moving and traveling in the region, as well as goods and goods and services as well. This work has been underway as a joint effort of Metro and the Oregon Department of Transportation really since 2019. The last 3 years, we've done a lot of deep diving into technical work, working with our technical committees, and then also bringing things forward for policymakers to provide feedback and direction on throughout the process. And last December, the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation and the Metro Council accepted the work that had been completed to date and forwarded it for further testing and refinement as part of the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan update. And Ellie Holmquist with Metro has been giving you periodic updates more recently on that. So the work that we've been doing since last December has been working to integrate the draft policies. It's a new vision and policies for mobility that really is thinking about how are we using our transportation and land use efficiently to support use of travel options and to reduce the need to drive, completing a multimodal transportation system that has options for all the different ways that people need and want to travel to get to their destinations. The policy is providing a prioritization on equity and improving safety and comfort for travelers, and has shifted a focus from moving a certain number of vehicles during the peak period to really thinking about retaining and maintaining reliability on the region's throughway system. So what Tim presented to you earlier with the regional freight study, they've been further exploring methods for how we're thinking about reliability of the throughway system, which is also a key part of our region's freight network and the statewide freight network. These 6 policies were developed through that process. I won't read through them, but all of these have been incorporated into the draft Chapter 3 of the Regional Transportation Plan that's now currently undergoing public review. And so based on public feedback that we get on the policy and the measures, which I'll talk about a little bit more, we may make additional recommendations for refinement as the Regional Transportation Plan is finalized for JPAC and Metro Council consideration later this fall. The core of the policy, in addition to having a broader vision, that's thinking about all the ways that people are traveling, the core parts of the measures for how we're measuring success and whether or not we're achieving that policy are these 3 measures. These measures really together are supporting establishing compliance with the new climate-friendly and equitable communities rules that were adopted by the Land Conservation and Development Commission last year, and that are still going through further refinement. But the vehicle miles traveled per capita measure, the Regional Transportation Plan itself must meet the VMT reduction target that was set in those rules for our Regional Transportation Plan, and then local plans need to help support making progress towards those goals or those targets. We also have a system completeness measure that is looking at completeness across all modal networks. So in the Regional Transportation Plan, we have regional networks. I'll highlight that a little bit more, and that we're measuring whether we're completing those parts of the regional system. At the local level, in your transportation system plans, many of you already have this as a measure, but this further operationalizes that as part of building a complete connected transportation system that's serving all users. And then the third measure, which is what Washington County staff had asked that I focus a little bit more on today, is reliability of the throughway system. And as Tim described earlier, the policy has established a threshold whereby that 35 miles an hour for the limited access freeways, which is essentially US 26, Highway 217, I-5, I-205, I-84, that you don't want the system to fall below 35 miles per hour for more than 4 hours per day. And then there's other facilities that are also designated as throughways in the Regional Transportation Plan, such as 99W south of Sherwood, also 99E in Clackamas County, Highway 30 that goes through Northwest Portland out to Scappoose. And for those facilities, they have traffic signals. They're not limited access. A 20 mile per hour threshold was selected. And that is all of these, the system completeness and the reliability measure, are ways to identify where there's needs, and that then work then would go towards identifying solutions to address those needs. And in some cases, it may be complete streets using transportation system management and operations strategy like traffic signal timing, managed lanes, tolling, or other potential solutions to address those identified needs. On the VMT per capita target, that is one of the overarching measures in this policy. There's still a lot of work happening at the state level. So this slide is just really trying to acknowledge that work. And
Tim, I don't think you're advancing.
Oh, it's advancing on mine.
Oh, mine might just be stuck.
Yeah, we're not seeing your slides moving.
Yeah,
interesting.
I thought it was me.
So where is the slide now?
We're still seeing the title slide right now.
Oh, interesting.
We're looking at a PDF version. Is that?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry about that. Yeah. My apologies. So on the regional transportation, the VMT per capita measure, this work is there's additional work underway at the state level to support implementation of that under the Climate Friendly Equitable Communities Implementation Program. And so we have further work to do, particularly while the RDP must meet that state target, we have further work to do to support how we would measure this, and particularly how local governments would measure the impacts of future land use decisions on this particular measure. So we will be continuing to do that work through the end of this year and into next year in collaboration and coordination with ODOT and DLCD.
Kim, if I can add one thing real quick. So when we say we're continuing to work, we have consultants that are working on developing tools for us and guidance for us right now that are folks you probably know. And also, since not everyone here is a planner, when we say land use decisions in this context, we're talking about zone changes. So we're talking about urban growth boundary expansions. We're talking about when Beaverton updated their design code and did their mixed-use multimodal downtown, those kind of things. The word land use change technically means a driveway permit or anything, but we're really talking about the big stuff here, the stuff that would come to council.
Thank you, Glenn. And this just highlights in this slide that the regional transportation plan, as I said, defines networks for each part of the transportation system as shown here. And that is also done as part of development of local transportation system plans. So each city and county does this for their systems. And so that then becomes the basis for defining what is needed to complete that system, and then is also part of evaluating those potential impacts as Glenn just identified. This map shows the throughways that are designated in the red lines on this map, as I described, and these are the designated throughways. This map here just shows a little bit better what those parts of the system are. And as I said, so the blue lines are those limited access facilities, US 26, Highway 217, I-5, I-205, I-84, and the 405 loop. And then in pink, these are the throughways that are signalized. And so this is another area that we've identified the need for further work on the methodology about how we're evaluating performance, but also in some cases it may be appropriate to revisit those throughway classifications for some facilities, particularly 224, or Oregon 224, sort of in the Carver area is one example of those. So in terms of implementation, I just want to highlight there's been a lot of work done to get us to this point and to get a draft policy for the regional transportation plan, and that this really is a starting point for a lot of additional work that will take time and more work to really implement at the regional level, at the local level, and at the state level. So we are in that second box where you see that we are here, and we are working to have the mobility policy adopted as part of the regional transportation plan this fall. We're developing some additional guidance, and we're still working with the technical committees at Metro and with ODOT and DLCD staff on some of the methods and how to do these evaluations going forward. One thing I didn't say at the beginning of the presentation is that this policy lives both in the regional transportation plan and the Oregon Highway Plan. So upon adoption of the mobility policy in the RTP, we would also be working to have the policy incorporated as an amendment to the Oregon Highway Plan, which will also be undergoing an update over the next year. And then for local implementation, that is directed through our Metro's functional plans. And so there'll be further work to update our regional transportation functional plan that we would be working with local partners as well as the state agencies to fully reflect the policy in there, and then working in coordination with the state on system planning and plan amendment guidance and developing the data and tools to support this. So I will stop there and just highlighting again that this policy really strongly supports the statewide policy and implementation of the climate-friendly, equitable communities, and there's further work to be done to continue to develop and implement it. So I will stop sharing my screen here. This is our contact number, and you do have our emails, and you do have the presentation in your packet.
Thank you, Kim. We appreciate that presentation. I know it's a lot to get through on a limited agenda. We are a little behind on our agenda, but if we have pressing questions or discussion points, let's zoom through them now. Otherwise, we will move on. And again, just as a reminder, right, that this will not be the last opportunity to discuss or ask questions.
And please, feel free to email questions or feedback that you have as well directly to both Glenn and I. Perfect.
Thank you. All right, we are going to go ahead and move forward. So the JPAC was canceled for August. Mayor Callaway, I don't know if you want to give us a very quick update on the July 20 JPAC meeting, but if there's something you would like to share, we can.
There's no such thing as a quick update
right.
for a previous meeting. So I'll just pass. But if there's anything that Commissioner Fye would like to add, I'll give her that space too. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Is it better now?
That's much better. Thank you, Commissioner Fye.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Fender. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, wonderful. Then we will go ahead. MPAC was also canceled for August. And Mayor Rosner, I don't know if you want to provide a recap of the July 26th MPAC meeting.
I would love to provide a recap, but I was unable to attend. And Steve, unless you have anything that you want to share, I think you were at the meeting. I don't think. Mayor Callaway. Did you have any updates from the MPAC meeting? I was unable to attend. So did you have anything pressing?
No, sorry, I was like passing.
Yeah. I was just going to jump in and say, I believe he's passing. Yeah.
I thought you were just waving at me.
That's right. All right. Let's see. We will move on then. Let's see. For other business and agency updates, Commissioner Fye, do you have any updates or want to provide any comments on the STRAC meeting? The July 24th RTAC meeting was canceled, but if you wanted to jump in with any updates, or we can move along.
No, nothing. Yeah, I would have provided some updates about the statewide rulemaking advisory committee that I also sit on, which actually relates to the question that Mayor Callaway was asking earlier, but I was at a conference and wasn't able to attend that meeting. So.
Understood. Thank you for that. Mayor Callaway, back to you if you want to provide any update on the Region 1 Act meeting.
It was held in Hood River. It was a great meeting. We had the opportunity to meet with the new OTC chair, as well as our new regional representative. It was, I think, a pretty well attended meeting. And I will tell you, the highlight of the meeting for me was what happened before the meeting. Mayor Lube and myself and others, we all got to walk through the Mitchell Point Tunnel, which is under construction. It is going to be opened for the first time in about 20 years to the public. And so it was, breathtaking views, just an incredible experience. And, so I'll leave it there and offer Mayor Lube the opportunity to, speak about any dry part from the meeting now that I've gushed over the pre-meeting activity.
No, you hit all the highlights, and the Mitchell Point Tunnel is really pretty cool. So when it opens up, I encourage everyone to go out there.
Great. Well, with 1 minute to spare, I'll hand it over to anyone else who has any updates from any other meetings that they'd like, or any discussion of a future agenda topic that you want to add to the list.
I just want to thank you, Mayor Pender, for jumping in and acting as chair today. Fantastic job.
No problem. Got off a little wobbly, but we got there in the end. And look, we're on time. We somehow got it back. I'm sorry to cut any important discussion short, but we can add it to another agenda. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Stephen, do we have to take a vote to close the meeting, or are we good to go?
We're good to go. Thank you.
All right. Well, then everyone stay cool and enjoy your afternoon. Thank you so much.
See you all
Thank
later.
you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you.